Okay, so yeah, welcome back. And so there are a few announcements here. So first thing is the assignment 0 is due this Thursday, okay? And don't forget to submit your repository link to the GitHub, to the Canvas, okay? And also the assignment 1 is extended to this Friday, so you got one more day to finish that. And today we're gonna actually to cover some gaps between, what we have right now. So current schedule between the, like let you know some additional information for you to finish your assignment 1, okay? And assignment 2 maybe gonna be released next week, but let's see. So if we can cover all the thing, by this Thursday, maybe I'm gonna release that on Friday. But if not, I'm gonna release that on maybe next week, maybe next Tuesday. Okay. Yeah, that's all. And now that's okay. Let me see. Let's pick it up from where we left last time. Okay, actually, let me first change the appearance. Okay. Okay, let's see. So also we have there were a typo here. So last lecture I put maybe something called color background color, right? It should be card background color, and the name you put here should be consistent with this one, okay? Otherwise it's just gonna give you some, just a clear color, because, well, the compiler cannot find the one, right? So yeah, this time I correct this one. This should be called card background color, okay? Now we have a color here, right? This color is defined in our assets folder. But what if you want to do something like more native feel? So for example, you want to do something like color, maybe we call it as like system background color or whatever, something similar like that. So how are we supposed to do that? We use extension to achieve that, okay? So now let's go back to this one. Now let's create an extension, okay? So by creating extension, we're gonna use the keyword as extension, okay? Followed by the keyword, it should be a name, like what kind of package you want to extend, okay? In this case, we want to extend on color, okay? The syntax looks like kind of like that. And by using extension, we essentially add some additional feature into the library or into the package you want to extend on. And as you can see, the color is defined in Apple's standard library, okay? And usually you cannot just go to the source code and modify the code they provide you. But by using extension, you can add additional feature afterwards, even, by adding some feature to the standard library, okay? It's doable. Now, by using this syntax, we're gonna extend some feature on the color, okay? Now we can add additional static let color, and this time we're gonna call this as system background color. Okay, I'm gonna just go with system background. Okay, and this time we're gonna move this thing, okay, to here. Okay, so by doing that, we add an additional static variable named as static constant variable named as system background, okay, to the color. Now we can use this color just doing something like the native UI syntax by doing color dot system background. Okay, let me actually show you this one. It should be the exactly thing. Okay, and before we move on, let me first show you some feature of the preview panel, okay? So go to preview panel here. You can see there are several buttons here. And you can go with this one, click on that. You can see there's some additional feature. You can adjust you can do some adjustments on the preview simulator, okay? Maybe, for example, if I want to see a dark mode, Okay, I can go with the color scheme and go with a dark. And you can see it changed to a dark mode. Maybe it's not visible on the screen, but the color actually is not like pure dark. It has some like contrast between the background color. Okay, now let's go below to check the. Actually, it's a little bit messy right now. So you can see this is the preview block we have. Okay, and by doing the kind of change the color scheme here, essentially the compiler just throw, actually the Xcode just add an additional view modifier on the preview. Okay, so you say dot preferred color scheme. Okay, and this time you go with dark. So that's actually how you modify your preview. Okay, so there's a bunch of different view modifier can apply it on preview. So this is one of that. It's called preferred color scheme. Okay, and yeah, we're gonna talk about more like how to customize your preview and to like make more sense to your workflow later. Okay. Maybe we're gonna go back with light by default. Okay. Now let's see how we actually can like organize our code into different files. For example, extension here. Usually we don't want this kind of extension here. Maybe we want a more clear file structure. So we can create a file. Actually, let's first create a group. So the group is kind of like a folder. But in Xcode, they call this as group. Okay, now we're gonna call this as extensions. Okay, just to help you organize your code. Okay, now inside this folder, I'm gonna create a new Swift file. Okay, and this time I'm gonna call this as color with a plus sign, and I'm gonna say utility. Okay, so there's some naming convention for creating an extension file. So usually you go with the library or the package you want to extend on first with a plus sign, and followed by the plus sign is the name you want to name the file. For example, in this case, I just provide some utility function or utility property to the library, to the color. Okay, so I go with color, plus sign, and utility. Now let's create this file. Now let's go back to our group card view and move this thing, okay, to here. Okay, let's try to compile this thing. And you can see there's some warning saying like the color cannot be found in this scope because the color is defined in Swift UI. Okay, so if you are familiar with the old UI kit thing, you're gonna know there's another color package in the old world. It's named as UI color, I believe. And so Apple hasn't port all the functionality from the UI color to the color library. But in this class, we're gonna focus on this library, this color library, instead of the other thing, okay? So we're gonna go with the color from the Swift UI package, okay? Now, that's how we actually organize your code to different file, okay? Usually we do this into by using this name convention, we create an extension file to hold our extension, okay? Now, let's go back to the content view. So right now, content view is still nothing, just simply text, okay? But what if you want to create a list of view to display all the different group card view we created before, okay? Now let's first try to, hard code several different group card view. Group card view here, okay? You go with by name, maybe group 1, all right? And you can actually copy paste several. Well, actually, we need a container. So first, we go with V stack here. Okay, we can have multiple group card view here. Okay, but the thing is, you don't want to hard code all these things because you may want to display this thing dynamically, right, during runtime. So there's one thing called for each. Okay, you can use for each. Essentially, for each, as I mentioned before, is just like a for loop to loop over a group of data and fed the data into your view, okay, and create a multiple view, okay. And now before actually I show you how to use for each, let's first create some dummy value for our to use, okay. Let's take a look at this code block. This is a new thing. So actually this block here. So do you still remember the syntax for the computed variable? The syntax for the computed variable, they're actually quite different. So if you still recall the exact syntax of compute variable, you should know for the compute variable, you don't have this assign symbol here, okay? So this thing is called closure initializer. So it's essentially when the compiler wants to first time initialize this variable, it runs this code block, okay, and returns something. Then it uses the return value to assign to this variable. So in this case, I simply generate, 10 name, okay, 10 like group 1, group 2, group 3, okay, and to append then to a array, and I return this array to assign to this variable, and then I remind the group names, okay, and there's one more thing to mention is here, okay, so this is a for loop in the Swift, okay, and this thing is unique, is quite special in Swift, is this called range, okay. By doing that, I essentially create a range of value from 0 to 10, and it's inclusive. So it includes 0 and includes 10, okay? Maybe if you sometimes don't want the 10, you want to be exclusive, you can go with like that, okay? So it has to be less than 10. You can do something like that, okay? But this time, I'll just go with the inclusive stuff. And of course, for this thing, okay, I create a new name and append the name to the array. I can go with string interpolation style. So I can go with maybe a slash and with the just I inside this. And this is total, this is valid, okay? Let's go back. Okay. So any question on this one? Is closure initializer.
This is for behind the variable names and also after the closure, like when there's a pair of like parentheses after the closure and after the names.
Wait, could you repeat that?
So, like, behind there's a parentheses.
Oh.
Parentheses words.
Okay, so by doing the closure initializer, you have to use this syntax. Essentially, you create a closure or you create a function, well, here, right? And this one is essentially calling this function, okay? And for this one, it's actually a special syntax for constructing an empty array in Swift. So as I mentioned before, so this one, the string, okay? This one is essentially equals to, let me see, it should be array, and this one. All right? Is that clear? So like the type is essentially the same in the Swift. Maybe I mentioned like last lecture, maybe? I forgot. But so this thing is just a synthetic sugar from the Swift language. Okay, so during compilation, you're gonna compile this thing to this type. Okay, and this thing is generic type. Okay, I talked maybe last time. And by doing that, so maybe okay, let me change the different way. I can go with array, array with string. So maybe that one looks more familiar, right? So you have a array as your class, okay? And the generic type for that one to store is string, and you call a constructor on that, okay? So they're essentially the same thing, okay?
Wait, do you need a parentheses for the generic type, or?
You don't. So.
Like, do you still need a parentheses that way?
What do you mean by parentheses? Like, where do you want to put the parentheses? Like after the string?
Like in line number 15,
Uh-huh.
do you still need the parentheses after array string? Since you were declaring, like, do you do call constructor?
Yeah, you do need call constructor on the array.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's
So
a
that is just like a simplified version of.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's simplified, or it's called synthetic sugar. Okay. So there's like multiple ways to doing arrays. Actually, you can also do the type annotation as I mentioned before, like this one. Okay. So they're also the thing. Okay. Yep. Okay. Now, so you're clear about this parameters here, right? Essentially define function and call the function. Okay. Now let's use the for each here. Okay. So now I have a list of names or list of strings. Okay. And I want to do a for each on this. Let me comment this out. Actually, delete this one. Let's see. The syntax looks like that. So for each takes a data. Okay. So the data we're gonna pass in this time is reminder group names, which is a list of string or list of names. Okay. And you can see it also takes content. And let's take a look at this type annotation here. So the Xcode actually provide this type annotation. So for this one, actually, you can see is a closure. Okay, you don't have to know about this type like dot element here. You don't need to worry about that. But essentially, it's a closure. Okay, it takes something and returns. Actually, it returns something, but use this underscore means we don't care what kind of thing it returns. Okay. Now, actually, we can hit the return to see this form. So this form is the trailing closure simplified process I mentioned before. Okay. So the compiler, by doing like you're hitting the return button, the Xcode actually automatically do the simplify process for you. Okay. And for this one, I'm gonna call this as let's see what I gave a name. It's just call it as name. Okay. So in this case, essentially I create a for loop on the reminder group names. Okay. And the name is the individual elements of the reminder group names. Okay. Now I can utilize this name to create our group card view here. So it takes a name. Okay. And give a name. Now let's try to compile this thing. Okay. Actually, there's some error. Sorry, give me a second. Okay, so trying to take a look at this arrow. It says referencing initializer blah 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 on for each requires a string to conform to a protocol named as identifiable. So the thing is, when we do a for each on something, okay, the compiler actually want the Swift UI want all the elements inside that array to be identifiable, to be conformed to identifiable. Why is that? Because later we're gonna go over animation stuff, and the Swift UI gonna trying to figure out so the order of the view inside some container, like inside the for each. Okay, and when you do animation, you want to take a look at this order and see how to actually I can animate these views. So this identifiable gonna provide such information for the Swift UI, like how you actually to identify your view. So let's see how we actually to conform this into identifiable. Okay, so it says the string has to conform to identifiable. Okay, but the issue is the string is defined in standard library, and we cannot modify standard library, right? Just as the situation is exactly the same when we're dealing with the color. So we can create an extension to extend on the string class. Okay, now let's actually create a new file here. This time I'm gonna go with string plus utility here. And the syntax again is the same. It's always extension. This time I'm gonna extend on the string. Okay. Now, this time I want to the string to conform to something. The syntax is like that, okay? I want to string to conform to identifiable. Oops, sorry. To conform to identifiable, okay? But you may say before, so the protocol sometimes have some like requirements. So if you want to the view to behave like, you want the struct to behave like a view, it has to, provide a body, right? This case is exactly the same. So if you want the string to conform to the identifiable, it has to provide a variable named ID, and the ID should be a unique identifier, okay? This case, I'm gonna just use the UUID thing, okay? I'm gonna just use that as a computed variable. I'm gonna just return a UUID and call a construct on this thing. It returns a UUID, okay? Now there's another warning named as like, it says ID has to be declared as public. There's some constraint when you're trying to extend or like you want to conform to protocol to a like internal library. So in this case, just gonna put a public here. So you don't need to worry too much about this public, as you just need to know this is required in this case. Okay, if we have time, we're gonna talk about the access control in the Swift. Okay. Now let's go back to our content view. So by doing that, we already have the string to conform to identifiable. So when each time the Swift UI want to check the ID for a string, it go into this function call. Okay, it checks the ID and returns a unique universal identifier. Okay. Now let's try to compile this thing one more time. Here we go. You can see actually it's working. Oh, actually I forgot one thing. So you have to provide a container to wrap the for each, because the for each essentially during the compilation it just create a multiple view for you. Okay, so you still need a VStack to contain all this view. Okay, and now let's actually change the frame a little bit to make it a little bit more nice. Maybe I'm gonna rule with height. Okay, let me see what height put there. So okay, it's 150. Here we go. We also want some padding, okay, horizontally. So that's how I do things like that. Now, let me see. Actually, we can also give a background on the VStack. See, background colored or maybe gray. I'll go with gray. And then you can see the layout. But there's one more thing, is now we have a VStack with 10 group card views, okay? But you can see from the preview, so they kind of overflow the screen because there are too many views. And if you're trying to run this thing, you can see you cannot actually interact with the view because it's just a VStack, it's static. So how to solve this situation? You can have another thing. It's called scroll view. Okay, do wrapper scroll view. Okay, put the VStack into a scroll view, and this time you can see you can scroll through the list. Okay, that's how I do that. And you can actually remove this VStack because, well, for every scroll view, essentially you already have a VStack embedded in the scroll view. So you don't need to explicitly put a VStack here. Okay, so that's how you use for each, and the elements for each inside the for each has to conform to an identifiable. Okay, and that's also how you to make things scrollable. Okay, all clear?
Do you need to pass another argument as ID in the for each?
No, you can actually, but in this case, when the elements, so first this is array of string, right? And when the for each loop through the array, essentially it acts as the individual string, right? So it requires the two individual string to conform to identifiable. So when your elements, in this case is string, already conforms to the identifiable, so the for each gonna just look at the ID, okay? Gonna fetch the ID. So all these things is done automatically behind the thing, okay? Actually, you can provide the ID. So it takes another thing called ID, and this thing, maybe I can go with self hash value, something like that. So this thing here, this special syntax slash dot self dot, actually just gonna go with slash dot hash value. This is key pass. It's called key pass. Essentially, it tells compiler whenever you want to use the ID, okay, go look at there's one property named as hash value, okay? It's defined on itself, okay? Just check out this property, okay? So you can sometimes, if you don't want your string to conform to identifiable, you can do things like that, okay? So you can specify the ID, like tell the compiler where to look at the ID, okay? Is that clear? So the key pass actually is quite complicated syntax in a Swift, and we won't cover too much about that. So in this class, you can just make your element to conform to identifiable, okay? Okay, now let's see. So yeah, so let's go back to the document I sent on Sunday, okay? So there are some hints or there's some gap for you, you have to know for you to complete your assignment 1, okay? The first thing is the shape. So again, everything in Swift UI is a view, and it's the same case for the shape. And the shape is something conforms to view, okay? You can use shape just like a view, okay? Actually, let me write something. Let's go with a new group. Maybe, and let's create a new file. Here we go. I'm gonna use this thing. Okay, so there's a lot of different shapes defined in the shape struct. So one thing is, actually the shape is a protocol, okay? So you can do like rectangle, okay? And when you check the documentation, maybe again holding the option key, check the documentation, and let's go to the bottom and see the relationship section, okay? You can see the rectangle conforms to a shape, okay? And the shape conforms to a view, okay? Now, that's how you do rectangles. You can also do circles, as I mentioned before. You can see the rectangle actually automatically expand the entire screen, okay? You can also do circles like that. And this shape, you can change the color for the shape, but instead of using the foreground color, in this case, you're gonna use another view modifier called fill, okay? So in the fill modifier, you can pass some color. Maybe you're gonna go with red, and you can see it changed to red. Okay, that's how you use the shapes. And in the assignment, you may want to use some like circle, to achieve some view you want. Okay. Now, another topic is about the layout. Okay, so we have talked about the vertical stack, the V stack, and horizontal stack. We have another stack, it's named as Z stack. So the Z axis is from, let's take a look at this simulator here, okay? So Z index actually is the axis from the, out of the screen to into the screen, okay? So it's kind of the depth. And when using the Z stack, actually, I'm going to put the Z stack here. It puts things on top of each other. Okay. In this case, I'm going to go with another rectangle. You can see it puts the circle on top of a rectangle. Okay, that's how you use Z stack. But there's other ways to lay out things on top of each other. Another trick you can do is by using the background view modifier. Okay, so for example, again, I have a, let me copy this thing. I have the circle here. Okay, I have circle here. Okay, so what if I want to put a rectangle, at the bottom of this circle? I can go with a background. Okay, the background can takes a view. Okay, take a look at this method. Okay, the signature here, it takes something called content, and content you can see is a closure. So that closure takes nothing and returns a view. Okay. Again, you can see the auto-completion is something like that, and you can see the content actually is a trading closure. Okay, so you can expand this thing to like that. Okay, now in this case, I can put the rectangle here. Okay, now that's how you using the background to lay out things like on top of each other. Okay, and another thing is overlay. Okay, by using overlay, you essentially put something onto another thing. So you can have a rectangle here, and I want to overlay a circle here. Actually, it's not visible here. They are all black. I can go with colored or red. You can see you overlay a circle on top of a rectangle. Okay, there are three major ways how you lay out things like in depth. Okay, let's see the next one. Next is the if-else statement in Swift UI. So as I mentioned maybe in the first lecture, why we want to use the Swift UI, because the Swift UI is built with Swift and the syntax is exactly the same as Swift language. That's why you can actually use the if-else statement, maybe just a if, or like you can also use switch statement inside a Swift UI view. Okay, actually let me show you. Actually, I'm gonna copy this thing here. Okay, let's try to replace this one. Oops. There we go. Okay, so take a look at this code block. You can see I have a flag, I have a variable, it's a Boolean. Okay, so by default it's false, and this is the view I want to define. Okay, in this case I can say if this thing is true, I'm going to display this SF symbol. Otherwise, I'm going to display this SF symbol. Okay, so the if-else statement is totally valid in the Swift UI view. Okay, now maybe I can take a look at the preview here. I can change this to true. Okay, you can see the change here. I'll resume this preview. You can see the change. Okay, that's how you use if-else statement. Or I can say maybe I want something more complex. Maybe I'm gonna go with just text here. Okay, say hello with a VStack. Wrap these two things, and I can just get rid of this else. Maybe I say if this thing is true, I'm gonna display additional element, UI element. Or if this is false, I can just show the text. Actually, resume this thing. You can see I just show a text. Okay, that's how you use the if-else statement in the Swift UI. So you can use if-else, else-if, and you can use switch. They are also valid. Okay. Now let's take a look at ternary operator, the usage of ternary operator in the Swift UI. Okay. Now this time I have a button in this case. So the button can be used to toggle this Boolean. Okay, so you can see this special function called toggle. Okay, so the toggle actually is automatically generated for every Boolean you have in the Swift, And by calling the toggle on a boolean, essentially it changed the boolean to false if it's true, and vice versa. Okay. So in this case, when I toggle this thing, when I click on the button, it changed this boolean to false, or change it to true, and I can use this ternary operator here by changing the image. Okay. So if that boolean is true, I'm gonna display this thing. I'm gonna use this thing. Okay. If it's not, I'm gonna use this thing. So instead of using the if else, you can just use ternary operator inside the view modifier. Okay. And actually, you can see the live action here. So it's totally working right now. Now, yeah, so you can use the ternary operator inside any view modifier, okay? And it's quite powerful when you're trying to modify things on the fly, okay? Now, let's go to the next topic is about like how to achieve a tap behavior without a button. So far, we can have a button to, to do some action or run some code when we tap on something, okay? But what if we don't have a button? Actually, let me copy paste this thing here. So in this case, now I use the if else statement to display two different icon, okay? And this time I don't want a button. I just want to tap on the image or the SF symbol. So I can define, I can add a view modifier named as onTapGesture, okay? And onTapGesture takes a closure, which is a function you want to execute when somebody tap on the UI elements. In this case, so as you may expect, when I click on the image, it changed to the field one, okay? If I click on one more time, it go back, okay? That's how you use this view modifier to monitor the tap behavior, okay? Now, there's one more thing is you can see we have two onTapGesture here, okay? And they're repeated, okay? Sometimes you don't want that kind of redundancy in your code. There's one more thing you need to know is group. So group essentially can group different UI elements into one UI element. And it does nothing actually. So it's just kind of a Swift UI view to help you organize your code. But you can use this thing to achieve some special thing. For example, you can just apply one onTapGesture on this entire code block, okay, on the group, and you have still the same behavior, okay? And you can even, let me see, can you change the foreground color? Yes, and you can change the foreground color maybe to red. You can see. So when you apply a foreground color, some view modifier like that on the group, okay, the group will propagate this view modifier into individual elements inside the group. Okay, in this case, during the compilation, essentially you apply this this foreground color view modifier to both image. Okay, that's how the group work behind the thing. Now let's take a look at next thing. Okay, the next thing is how to scale an image. Okay, so as you can see here, the actually, let me try to copy this thing here. So in this case, I have two image, okay, two SF symbol, okay, as I showed you before. In this case, I'm trying to modify the frame. So essentially, I'm trying to scale the second UI elements, maybe make it a little bit bigger, okay? But you can see the image doesn't actually scale. So by checking out this blue rectangle, you can see the frame actually expanded, but the scale is not. So the reason is by default for all image in Swift UI, they cannot be resized. Okay, but you can bypass this constraint by calling a view modifier named as resizable. You can explicitly tell the compiler this image can be resized. Okay, That's how you want to do things like that, okay? Now, I think that's all you need to know for you to complete your assignment 1. Of course, you may need to know additional information about like how to apply a shadow, how to do a strike through on the text. So you can check out online, or to take a look at the document. They're here, okay? Oh, actually, there's one more thing I want to mention is the image. Actually, it's a button, okay? So all the thing I showed you before, you can do button like that with a label, okay, and do something here, okay? Like hello, do something here. So there's another way to define the button in Visual UI. Actually, you can define the view of the button. Let's take a look at the constructor it provides. So take a look at this one, this constructor. So this constructor have 2 arguments. First one is take an action, which is kind of the behavior you want to achieve when you type on the button. And second one is a label. Label is a view you want to use on the button. So maybe this time I'm gonna go with just print hello. And inside this label, I can go a little bit maybe fancy. Maybe I can just put the image here. So you can take a look at this. So this one here is a button, okay? And this time it's not just a text, okay? You can provide some complex view to the button, okay? You can maybe also even put the text here, hello, like that, okay? You can see by default it applies a horizontal stack between different elements inside this block, okay? That's how you, to define the button in a different way. Okay. Now we have 7 minutes left. Okay. Now let's go back to our code before. Actually, let me check. So it should be group card view. Yeah. So let me minimize this thing. Okay. So right now you can see in the preview window, we cannot really tell the boundary of our card. Okay. So you can modify your preview to achieve that. Oops, I'm gonna remove this thing. Okay. This time I'm gonna apply a background. Okay. As I mentioned before, of course, you can just apply a background here, okay? Well, actually, instead of doing background, so we can do this step here, okay? And put a color, maybe not gray, at the bottom of the group card view. So right now you can see more clearly the boundary of our group card view, okay? Of course, you can also do the background thing. Okay. Again, I'm gonna go with gray. Okay. That's how I use the background. But this time, you can see the background actually is not really visible. The issue is that this stack actually just as big as our card view. Okay. So the this stack or the V stack or the H stack or the container, they just take the space they need. Okay. In this case, you can see, oh, the inner view, the inner group card view just needs that much space. So I won't just grow. But you can explicitly to tell it to grow, okay, by using the frame view modifier. In this case, I can see the max width to be infinite, okay, and the infinite actually is defined in cgfloat dot infinite. Okay, but due to type inference, you can just get rid of the cgfloat. Okay, so by applying this trick, you can explicitly to let this stack to take all the space is available on its the x-axis. Okay, of course you can expand the height to the max height, because again infinity, and you can see expand. Okay, that's how you do this thing. Of course, you can actually to apply this frame view modifier twice. This time you can just go with do something like that. It's also the exactly same syntax. Okay. Now, actually, let's see. So, what if I want to apply our own view modifier? Because actually, when you're developing your own app, you can see again and again, you may sometimes want to expand your view conveniently. Okay? So how are we supposed to do that? So maybe we want to combine these two things into our own defined or our customized view modifier. We can do that. Okay? Now, actually, let's first create a new group. Maybe just call it as view modifiers. So this time we want to define our own view modifier. Okay. I'm gonna go with a Swift file. This time I'm gonna call that as let's see, maybe go with expand. Okay. Maybe I want to call that as expand. Okay. So now I want to change it to Swift UI. Okay, I want to define a struct named as expand. Okay, and this thing needs to be conformed to one thing called view modifier. Okay, to define our own modifier, we can do something like that. To declare a struct, this time we call this expand, and it has to conform to view modifier. Okay, so again, there are some constraint to be something behaves like a view modifier. In this case, we have to provide a function named body. Okay, body essentially modifies something. So the content passing is the view. You call this view modifier on. Okay, and you can use this content and apply some view modifier on that. In this case, maybe I want to go with max width infinite or max height, okay, infinite. Okay, so now we have our own view modifier which can expand on both directions. Okay, now let's go back to our group card view. Let's try to apply this thing. Okay, get rid of these two things. So we can call another view modifier named as modifiers. Okay, inside this modifier, we pass the expand structure we defined. Okay, now again, let's try to resume this scene. And you can see the effect is the thing. Okay, so essentially it goes to this one and apply this view modifier we just created. Okay, and this view modifier essentially just expand the entire view like in both directions. Okay, that's how you define your own view modifier. But we may want to take one more step, because it's kind of verbose, right? You can say dot modifier and passing another thing. Maybe we want to something more native. We want to say dot expand. Okay, how we actually achieve that? So, because we are running out of time right now, we're gonna show you guys next time about how to actually define more native version of view modifier. Okay? Any question? Okay. All right, then see you guys on Thursday.